Can you see my screen right now?
Yes.
Yeah, so like I said, I'm not going to bore all of you with a lot of technical stuff on today's, the 30 or 40 minutes that I have. But like I mentioned before, we'll just take a look at some of the key aspects, some of the key things that you have to live by or that you have to abide or inculcate back in your life to become successful. So this is one of the famous quotes by, Steve Jobs. And the key thing that Steve talks about here is, you have to find that job that you love, right? The job that you are passionate about, the job that you would, it's when you actually get yourself a job, it's not just about earning a livelihood, right? It's not just about getting paid. There's much more than that. You are basically doing what you love to do. And if you are not at a place or at a job which you don't like, you're going to get bored of it very soon. So this adventure of yours, to find the thing that you love to do, to find the thing or that job that you're passionate about, you shouldn't give it up. If you don't find it at one place, you keep working hard, you keep paving your journey, you keep paving your path to actually find it. So what's the agenda for today? We'll look at the four golden tips. The four key principles that you have to inculcate to become successful. I think Banu and many others have already talked about it, but I will just take a moment to emphasize it, and I'll take a moment to explain how you can achieve it, right? So the four golden tips. The four golden tips are conquering the basics, understanding the fundamentals, asking yourself why at every point in time whenever you learn something new, practice, practice, and practice, and never stop learning. And then finally, we'll explore some of the gems on the internet, because back on the internet, you have a lot of things that you can actually use to learn about Salesforce. You have Trailblazer, you have Trailhead, you have Success Community, you have user groups, you have Apex Academy, you have Udemy. There are a lot of things on the internet, and you might be a little overwhelmed at the very beginning, right? Like I'm lost. I don't know which one to learn from. So in that slide, we'll learn about how you can navigate yourself through these gems on the internet, and then we'll talk about participating on the forums, and then finally wrap it up with a Q&A. So what are the four golden tips that which I have learned out of my practice? I've been in this ecosystem for close to 7 to 8 years now, and trust me, I'm still learning, and the learning never stops. So these are the four principles that I abide by, or that I inculcate back in my life, and this is something which has helped me to reach where I am today. Right. So the first one is conquer the basics, understanding the fundamentals. The next step is asking yourself why. When you basically learn something, when you basically do something, you have to take a moment to stop and ask yourself, why am I doing this? Is there another way to do this? And when you keep asking yourself why, it helps you to be creative, right? And the third thing, which just Banu mentioned, which is practice, practice, and practice, right? When I passed out of college, I didn't pass out with flying colors. I didn't have a ton of jobs, or neither did I have a proper, degree in my hand. I had a bunch of papers that I had to complete when I passed out of my college myself. But if there's one thing that has helped me to reach here where I'm today, is practice. And there's really nothing impossible which is out there that you cannot achieve. You can achieve anything and everything with practice, determination, and passion. And some of the fears and hesitations that every passed out of college or student might have is, programming is not my strong suit. I don't know how to write code. Trust me, this programming languages or this code or the Salesforce platform was not developed for, the geeks or the geniuses to do. It was developed for everyone. And all you have to do is to go out there, explore, start practicing, and you wouldn't know how, you just wouldn't realize that you're learning it. And the final tip is never stop learning. And the interesting thing about never stop learning is, Salesforce themselves emphasizes that, and we will understand how Salesforce does that to you, right? So this is another very famous quote from Martin Fowler. Anyone out there, you can easily learn a programming language. You can easily write to code. You can easily you can easily learn to build application. You can easily learn programming languages to write code. But doing it in a way that someone else can understand or someone else can easily understand with a lot of effort, that's where you excel at, right? So anyone can write code that a computer can understand, but good programmers, good developers write code that humans can understand. Now, conquering the basics. This is something which has been emphasized right from the beginning of today's webinar. Think about, I take a very simple example to explain this, right? You have all the huge buildings, skyscrapers out there, but have you ever imagined the foundation that these buildings or these skyscrapers have underneath the ground, right? So the Burj Khalifa that's there in Dubai, right? Have you ever imagined how far deep down has it been drilled down to actually withhold the entire weight of the building? Imagine you are actually building a 14 stories apartment or a building without a strong foundation. Imagine you're building it with a very weak foundation. You never even paid any respect or any time, or you didn't even put any effort to build a strong foundation. You were so fast, you were really impatient to learn things, or you were really impatient to build the 14 stories apartment without even dedicating some time or effort to building a foundation. And you know what happens if you do that? We just don't know when this apartment or when this 14 stories building is going to, reach the ground one day, right? So that's the same thing applies when you are learning Salesforce. Now, it doesn't apply to just Salesforce alone, right? Whatever technology out there, you have to make sure that you have a very solid foundation. You understand the basics, right? When we recruit candidates, we don't expect them to have 10 certifications. We don't expect them to have 20 certifications. We don't expect them to have, a lot of certifications or stuff like that. All we expect them to have is a solid foundation. All we expect them to have or expect them to know is the foundation, just the basics. We're not expecting them to, when we basically take an interview, we're not expecting them to answer questions about AI or machine learning or Einstein platform. No, we don't expect that. We just want them to be solid about their fundamentals. If you can distinguish about, or if you can speak authoritatively on your fundamentals, that's all we expect, and that's your biggest certification, trust me. So when you start about learning Salesforce, there are a lot of fundamental aspects about computing that you can learn or that you can spend time on, right? Before you hop onto Salesforce immediately. There are fundamental aspects about cloud. There are different types of cloud offering. There's something called infrastructure as a service. There is something called platform as a service. There's something called software as a service. So all these basics about cloud, and I'm not expecting you to become an expert in all of these. I'm not expecting you to, talk about infrastructure as a service for 30 minutes in a row without leaving a breath. So no, that's not what I'm expecting. Simply understand what does that mean, and how does this help you? It helps you to understand where does Salesforce stand, right? To which category does Salesforce belong to? Then there are a lot of fundamentals about the web. Many of the students and colleagues that I've mentored, it's a little bit sad to know that they forgot to learn about the fundamentals of the web. right? They forgot to learn about what is a server. They forgot to learn about what is a client. Again, I would like to emphasize, no, I'm not expecting you to become an expert in all these. I'm not expecting you to learn about what is a TCP or what's a, I'm not the server stack. No, just the fundamentals of a server, with the fundamentals of what a client is, and HTML, CSS, or JavaScript. Trust me, these are really an inevitable skill today, right? Salesforce has brought about this new programming paradigm, which is called the Lightning Web Components, which is really based on the web components paradigm that the world and the web is evolving towards. In order for you to do web components well, in order for you to build a Lightning Web Components well, you need to have a very strong foundation on JavaScript, CSS, and HTML, right? And then another thing that I would suggest you to spend a little time reading is about databases, right? If you are a computer science graduate, you might have had a paper called database programming, where you might have learned about relational database models. Again, for those candidates who are not from a computer science background, you still don't have to worry about all this, because I emphasized on the very important fact that I'm not expecting you to become experts in all of these. I'm just expecting you to have a basic understanding about databases. When you say database, what is it really about? It's about storing data. How do you store data? You store data in the form of rows. And where are these rows stored? Inside of a table. And a table might have a lot of columns. So all these basic fundamental aspects is all that I'm expecting you to understand and learn. Now, why should we learn all these fundamentals? Just like the example that I just spoke about, right? You have a very huge building with a weak foundation. If you have a weak foundation, you just don't know when this is going to reach the ground, right? And when you have a strong or a very decent understanding about the fundamentals, it'll be very easy for you to learn Salesforce or relate it to what you see in Salesforce, right? Back in Salesforce, when you actually create objects, you can tell yourself, oh, wait, when I'm creating an object, what does that really mean? It is simply means that you're creating a table inside of a database. You're adding fields. What does that mean? You're simply adding columns inside your database. So when you understand the fundamentals, it'll be very easy for you to relate it to them. Another example or another aspect that I would always, that I usually talk to people whom I know is, when you learn about something, it's always interesting if you relate it to an example, right? So I just talked about the different cloud offerings, which is infrastructure as a service. There's something called platform as a service. There's something called software as a service. I usually explain this to, the folks that I know using an example of an empty flat and then a furnished flat, right? Imagine you got a job in Bangalore, or maybe you got a job in Hyderabad, right? And you're actually moving from your hometown to this job location. Now you need to find a house. You need to find a flat where you can actually live in, and you can actually go back and forth from your office and stuff like that. So what are your options out there? You can actually go for an empty flat. What's an empty flat? You just have the doors and the windows and maybe electricity and the bulbs. That's pretty much that you have in an empty flat. You don't have any other facilities for you. You don't have a sofa. You don't have a TV. You don't have a washing machine. You don't have wardrobes. You don't have a mattress or anything. It's an empty flat. And you know what? Infrastructure as a service can be thought as synonymous to an empty flat. What is infrastructure as a service? The company that is giving you an infrastructure as a service will just give you the server and the tools. Then it's up to you to install the software. It's up to you to install the applications. It's up to you to install the tools. Pretty much like, you buy an empty flat and then you are going out to buy your furniture. You're going out to buy a washing machine. You're going out to buy your TV, and then you have this idea of furnished flat. What's a furnished flat? You just have to go into the flat with your belongings, which is probably only the clothes that you have, because everything else you need is there inside the flat, right? You have You have furniture, you have washing machine, you have TV, you have everything that you want inside of that flat. So that's a furnished flat. You can think of your platform as a service and software as a service as a furnished flat. The company that is providing you the software as a service, or this company that's giving you this platform as a service, is giving you everything ready-made. You just have to, pretty much like you going into a furnished flat with just your belongings, you just have to get started in no time because you have everything there ready-made. Like you're going into a furnished flat, you just have to learn how to operate the washing machine. You just have to learn how to operate the TV. You don't have to go out hunting for a TV or a washing machine. No, it's already there inside of your flat. You just have to learn it, how to use it. So that's like a software as a service and a platform as a service. So what I'm trying to focus here is when you learn by relating something to an example or something that's closer to your daily life, it ensures that you don't forget it, right? And another example that I always explain to folks when I talk about cloud is comparing to a journey on a bus, right? Imagine you're traveling all the way from your home to the airport because you have to fly to New Delhi tomorrow, right? So you imagine you're living in Bangalore and you want to drive all the way to the airport to catch a flight to New Delhi. And what are your options? You can rent a Uber or maybe a Ola, or maybe you can even drive your own car. Probably even drop it at the airport and then fly. So you can actually think of cloud as pretty much the same. If you are actually using your own car, to go all the way to the airport, you are spending your own money. You're spending your own fuel. You are using your own car. It's just for you, right? It's just for you. But what if you're taking a bus all the way from your hometown in Bangalore to the airport in order to catch the flight? That's a cloud. What cloud basically means is that they're giving you, when you're traveling on a bus, you don't have to spend the entire amount of the journey, right? You just have to give a portion of the entire amount because there are many other passengers along with you traveling on the same bus from your hometown all the way to the airport. So you don't have to spend the entire amount of money. You just have to give a portion of it. And that is exactly what cloud is, right? The company is giving you the resources. The company is renting out the service. The company is renting out the computing power, and you just have to give a small dividend every month to use it. So the point that I'm trying to make here is you basically understand your basics by relating it to examples that is around you. And by doing this, you can make sure that the idea or the concept is, it's concrete in your mind, right? And like I mentioned before, we don't expect you to get 10 certifications or 12 certifications. No, we don't expect that to be the idea. Understand your basics really well. Now, this is just an example that I talked about. You have infrastructure as a service, which is an empty flat with nothing. And then you have a platform as a service or a software as a service with a flat with everything. You have the furniture, you have the table, you have the dining table, you have the sofa, pretty much everything. So the whole idea that I'm trying to emphasize again and again is when you learn, you stop, you try to relate it to an example that you know of, something that you can relate to your daily life. And by doing this, you make sure that you know the idea, you understand the concept, you understand the terminology really well. Now, this is another very interesting quote from Albert Einstein. You should never stop questioning, right? You should always ask yourself why. And trust me, this is a really important concept or an idea that emphasizes creativity, right? You just don't have to follow a set of guidelines or paths which probably others have done. No, there is always a room for creativity. You can always stop. You can always ask yourself, why am I doing this? Isn't there another easier way to do this? Okay, let me just not read this. Let me just go out there and try it, right? So ask yourself why. Now, like Banu already had mentioned, there is no shortcut to anything, right? The moment you hear shortcuts or the moment you find shortcuts, trust me, those are really kind of like a poison. You shouldn't stroll your way towards that. Learning is a very gradual process and it doesn't happen overnight, right? If you have done it through probably a shortcut or maybe a different, probably not a recommended approach, then you're actually not learning it. You're right. You're just getting it done. Getting it done and then getting it done the right way are two different things, right? Another thing that I always emphasize is stop and ask why, right? Say, for example, you're doing a trail mix. On Trailhead, one of the very good things about Trailhead is they explain concepts in a layman's language, right? They don't use all your textbook terminologies and sophisticated words and vocabulary to explain concepts. They explain concepts really well with a very simple layman terms. Now, which is actually good. But after you read a trail mix and after you do an exercise, you have to really stop and ask yourself, why am I doing this? What was the whole intention of this trail mix? What was the whole intention of this idea? Thinking out loud, connecting the dots, right? Imagine you learned, you are on the third trail mix. Imagine you are on the fourth trail mix. The whole idea is to connect to the dots, understand what you learned in the first trail mix, understand what you learned in the second trail mix, and connect them together to understand what's the bigger picture. What am I trying to do? What am I really doing? What am I really learning here, right? One of the things that I've seen happening when you do Trailhead is you might just go mechanical, right? They give you the steps how to do. Go to setup, find the flows, click on the new flow button. No, which is actually good. But you have to make sure that you don't become mechanical. You're not just following the steps. You're not just, a machine which is following a set of commands and you're just doing it. No, you have to stop. You have to stop yourself and you have to ask, wait, why am I doing this? Why do you need this in the first place? What's the whole idea here? Let me go back to my previous trail mixes. Let me go back to my previous modules. Let me try and connect the dots. Let me try to understand the bigger picture. What am I trying to do? Right? Now, when you do this, you're actually arousing the creativity inside of you, right? Imagine the trailhead or trail mix, or maybe even your mentor is basically asking you to do something by following 5 steps, right? It's not written in stone or it's not written anywhere that you have to always follow the 5 steps to do it. You can always stop and think, wait, is there another easier way to do this? This has 5 steps. Can I not do this in 3 steps? Can I not do this in 2 steps? So all you have to do is stop, ask yourselves questions. Why am I doing it? Because that emphasizes creativity. Like say, for example, your team lead or maybe your mentor is asking you to, go and write an Apex trigger or write 100 lines of code to do this. You always have that freedom, or you always have that, the freedom to basically stop and ask, why am I going to do this? Can I not do this with the process? Can I not do this with the workflow? Can I not do this in 2 steps instead of following 10 steps? Right? So it's not necessary that you have to always follow a set of steps which is written in stone. No, you have always, you have to keep an open mind. You have to arouse that creativity inside of you, right? It's not that only certain people are born with creative skills or a specific set of unique talents. It's just that you have to develop it, right? It's all there within you. It's not that this is something which only people with a certain degree of IQ or geniuses can do. No, there's literally nothing like that, and that's a very baseless or stupid terminology, right? And another thing which Banu has already really emphasized on, practice. If you practice hard, you can win every single battle out there, right? When I started my journey, when I started Salesforce, like I mentioned before, I was not a geek. I was not a genius. A below average student like every one of you out there, right? And what I did was I practiced, right? When I read a document which explains what workflows are or which explains what processes are, I went there and I practiced. I did it n number of times. I did it 5 times. I did it 10 times. I put in an effort to basically master that. So you can win every single battle if you have practice. And I think you all know the very famous Chinese proverb which says that practice makes the man perfect, right? So practice, practice, and practice, right? Say for example, like you just mentioned, imagine you learned about workflows. Imagine you learned about processes. Imagine you learned about objects and fields. Why not stop? Think about a use case of your own. Think about an idea of your own. Think about some example which is around you and do it in Salesforce, right? And when you create your own examples with your own use cases or ideas, and when you do it, you're actually learning it, right? Now imagine you learned about HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. This is what I've been doing for the people that I've been mentoring. You learn HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. Why not go and build your resume using HTML, CSS, and JavaScript? And you know what happens when you do this? You start exploring. You're keeping your resume on the left-hand side, and you're trying to use HTML, CSS, and JavaScript to build your resume, or to build an online resume. You're basically exploring everything else in HTML and CSS and JavaScript. You're learning, you're making mistakes, you're learning from mistakes, you're reading how to solve that. So there's a constant and a gradual learning process that's involved. It's not just like, I'm, okay, for HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, I have to read a 20-page manual and I'm done with it. No, that's not the idea here. And no one is going to be perfect with that, right? You learn about HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, figure out an example and try to do it. This is what I typically tell people whom I know. Like, HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, prove it to me. Go build your resume using HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. I'm not asking you to do rocket science here, right? Just use your basic HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, build out a resume, and show it to me, right? And this is very important. Platforms like Trailhead, Code Academy, everything introduces you to the concept, and they do it really well. Like I mentioned before, Trailhead uses a very simple verbose or layman terms. It's very easy for you to understand, but that's not the end of it, right? Imagine like as we previously talked about, someone said that I finished all my 6 trailheads. No, you have only scratched the surface, my friend. And there is a big ocean out there for you to explore. You don't have to stop, right? Like, you have to break out of that typical, practice that you have been doing for your past entire life, which is, you have a textbook in front of you, you learn everything that's in the textbook, and you're ready for the exam. That's not really what learning is all about. It's all about practice. It's all about exploring it. It's all about asking yourself why. It's all about being creative. You learned about a new topic or a new feature. That's not the end of it. You basically go out into Salesforce, try it out by yourself, create your own examples, create your own use cases, right? And then do it. And that's the way you become perfect. And when you do this, what happens is you are actually mastering the idea, right? And the very important thing is, don't hesitate to ask. You have an amazing ecosystem out there. The Salesforce ecosystem is really vibrant. People are so open-minded. They're so helping. You can always go ahead and ask your question. You will notice that it's getting answered in a fraction of minutes or seconds. Right? It's an amazing ecosystem out there. And this is one of my favorite quotes from Albert Einstein again. Once you stop learning, you start dying, right? Like I mentioned before, I'm still not done learning, and that never stops. This is a very constant process. You have to learn, you have to keep learning all the time, right? This never stops. Never stop learning. Now, one of the key things about Salesforce is, Salesforce has this unique feature, which is they release new features 3 times a year, right? And by doing this, they are bringing close to 100+ features in a span of 3 months. So like in a span of an entire year, you have like a ton of features to learn. Sometimes even more than 300, 400, 600 features that you have to that they release in a year, right? So you can never stop learning, right? You know, after, like, imagine, assume that you learned something, and after 3 months there is again a new feature that's coming. Then after 6 months there is again a new feature coming. So Salesforce is introducing all these new features 3 times a year, and you cannot rest. You have to keep learning all the time. So when Salesforce releases a new feature, there is something called release notes. 600 pages, 650 pages worth PDF, which you can, you have to spend days and weeks to learn through them, to read through them. So there are new features which is coming every time or the other. So there is no stop to learning, right? The moment you stop learning, you're actually dying. You're becoming outdated in the market, right? Things which you had done previously with code, like imagine you used to write Apex code or Apex triggers 3 months ago. Maybe after 6 months, you will not have to do that again in Salesforce, because Salesforce is constantly evolving. Salesforce is constantly bringing features and functionalities which you can accomplish without writing code or without putting a lot of effort on it. So things which took you 2 hours to do or maybe 1 hour to do 3 months ago might just take 10 minutes or 5 minutes in the coming 6 months, because there is a new shiny new feature out there which you can actually use, right? So how would you know that? After 6 months, if you're still using that same 2 hour lengthy process to accomplish a task, and if you're not aware about the new feature, which you can actually use to get the thing done in 5 minutes, you're actually outdated. You're just not learning, right? So you can never stop learning. You can never stop exploring. Another thing, which I emphasize to people that I know is, imagine you've learned a new feature, right? Imagine you learned about something that's new. Start a blog of your own, write a blog post on that new feature. Hey, today I learned something new. I learned that Salesforce introduced a new feature where you can actually schedule your flows. Or I learned a new product that Salesforce released, which is called Einstein Voice. Or I learned something else wherein Salesforce said that you can now use Einstein for OCR, which is optical character recognition. So you learned something new, right? Now what do you need to do? You stop. You find a use case, you try it out and write a blog. And what are you doing by this? You're learning more about that feature. You're starting a blog of your own. You're writing a blog with all these unique features, and all these helps to improve your personal branding, right? When you actually go out for a job, and if you have a blog of your own, there are a lot of things that proves. It proves that you have a good hold of communication. It proves that you have a good, you have that curious mind to learn new things. It proves that you can speak authoritatively on a feature. So when you have all these things, you are actually improving your personal branding, right? And when you have a more chance to actually get a job, because the person who's recruiting you, and the person who's recruiting you knows that you know how to write blog, or you can blog on new features. That proves a lot of things there. That proves you have good communication skills. That proves that you have that curiosity to learn new things. That proves that you can, you have all that passion within you, and that's a big advantage for you when you're actually going and hunting down for a job. Now, user groups. We are all amidst this COVID pandemic this year, and pretty much all the events is going to happen virtually, right? A lot of user group meetings and lot of conferences. Everything is going to happen virtually, which is definitely for the good of ourselves, right? We don't want to create another pandemic wave again. But there is another big advantage to this. Imagine you are in Bangalore and there is Trailhead X that's happening in New Delhi. There might be technical and logistical challenges for you to travel all the way to New Delhi to attend it. But now that it's happening virtually, what's the biggest advantage that you have? You can watch the event right from the comfort of your home. And that's not it. A lot of user group meetups are happening virtually. You can always approach your the folks that yeah, I want to be a part of this user group. You know what, I'm a budding student, but I learned something new. I learned a new little feature in Salesforce. Can you give me an opportunity to speak at your user group, right? So when you do all this, you're actually improving your personal branding. And trust me, these are not rocket science, or these are not things which are meant for the people, who has 5 years or 10 years of experience. You basically start everything slow, right? And you cannot really come out of your comfort zone unless you give it a shot or you try it, right? So the whole idea is never stop learning in Salesforce. Like I mentioned in the very beginning, Salesforce emphasizes this very idea because they are constantly releasing features 3 times a year, and there is no stop to it. Now, exploring the gems on the internet, there are a lot of things out there on the internet. You have Code Academy. Now, this is something which I insist for, people who start fresh. If you don't know HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, you don't have to worry, right? You really don't have to worry. There's something which is called Code Academy, Code School, where they basically teach you the elementary concepts about HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. And this is very important when you are pursuing a career as a Salesforce developer, or maybe let it be even a Salesforce consultant who is not going to deal with code at all. But still knowing all these fundamentals is really important. And one of the good things about Code Academy and Trailhead also is they teach you by making you do it, right? Now, this is very important when you learn. Back in our school days, we have had this, typical convention of learning by reading, right? You always learn by reading and reading. But that mindset or that practice needs to change when you step into this ecosystem. You have to learn by doing and not reading, right? That's the only way by which you can emphasize and you can solidify the concepts inside of your head, right? So Code Academy, there's this platform out there which basically teaches you about HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. And the good thing about this is it basically teaches you by doing it, right? You have to basically go out, you have to basically do it. You have to start writing it. And it's absolutely understandable that you might have that inherent fear, but trust me, it goes away when you start doing it. When you just come out of your comfort zone and when you basically start doing it. And then there's this Trailhead. Trailhead, I think it's your one-stop shop to learn everything about Salesforce. But here is my piece of advice. You should not be mechanical. You should not be inside of a rat race to earn badges. No, that's not really what is happening here, right? We're not looking for if you have 700 badges or 500 badges. If you have 100 badges, or if you have 50 badges, and if you can talk about what you learned in that 50 badges, that is your gain, right? That's the most important thing here. And then there's this Apex Academy by David Liu, which is on Plural site and which is absolutely free. And David Liu is one of the pioneers in this mentoring ecosystem. He has this website. I'm not sure if you guys have heard about it. It's called sfdc99.com, where he teaches about coding, in baby steps. And the Apex Academy is just a virtual version of what he has done on sfdc99.com. It's an excellent series of courses that you can always attend. And there are a lot of other courses on Udemy too. But again, I would still love and I would still emphasize the very basic idea. When you learn something, you pause. You take time, you ask yourselves why. You go out into Salesforce, you play with it, you try it, and then you go to the next thing. And come up with the use cases, explore it, so on and so forth. Now, participating on the forums. Now, this is another key advice or something which is worth considering. What do we do as developers? We typically, you have a problem, you just Google it, you find the answer, you just copy paste it and you start doing it. But wait, why don't you approach it a little differently? What if I can start answering there? What if I can start contributing? Now, when you start answering questions on those forums, what is the best thing that's happening there? You're basically you're getting a problem, you're getting a use case, you're getting an example. So you read the question, you try to understand what the question is about, you try to understand what the ask is, you go back into Salesforce, you find a solution for it. Please do not mind if it's already answered or if it's closed. That's not the thing here. You're basically trying to learn. You're basically trying to get examples. You're basically trying to get questions, right? So you go to the answers board, you have the developer.salesforce.com, you have Stack Exchange, you have success.salesforce.com. Go look into questions, right? I'm not expecting you to look into all complex questions out there. Go through the bunch of questions, see if there is an easy question that you can understand. If you understand the question well, the next step is don't look at the answers, go back into Salesforce and try if you can find a solution for that yourself. Now, what if you found a solution which is way better than the others? You can always go and post that, right? So you are building your confidence, and by doing this, you're actually motivating and propelling learning within yourself, and the priceless gift, which is you're helping others, which is very important, right? And when you participate on these forums, you don't have to be hasty, right? Read the questions, see if you can solve it. And again, I'm not asking you to look into questions which are really complex or which are not decipherable. No, go to simple questions, right? You got the question, you understand what the question is. Okay, now let me stop. Let me go back to Salesforce. Let me try it out. And what happens? What if you found a new or a creative way to solve it? You can go back and post it, right? So that's a learning that is motivating yourself to learn, that is motivating yourself to be curious, to be creative, and trust me, nothing is easy, right? Things will be very hard in the very beginning, but you have to be passionate and you have to be persistent with it, right? You don't, if you give up way too early, that's actually a failure. Nothing is easy. Trust me, I have had a lot of hardships my way, but the passion and the determination within myself that I'm not going to give up is what helped me to reach here, right? So you have to never give up. You just keep doing what you always do. So these are, some of the key things, like I mentioned before, my idea was not to bombard you with a lot of technical ideas or concepts, but some very basic principles in life that you can abide by regardless of what is a path you're going to take forward, which you can actually use to excel at what you do. So that's pretty much to my presentation, and